Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another live broadcast of the Kev Baker Show with yours truly, Kev Baker. And you know what comes next? I'm coming to you from the smart land of Glasgow in the heartland of Scotland. We're going all the way down to Australia, up to Alaska, over to Norway and back to Nebraska. And we do that all thanks to this brilliant network, Truth Frequency Radio, tfrlive.com. So wherever you are, whenever you are, big, huge, massive, warm welcome to what I think is going to be, if you pardon the pun, an epic show. Some of the most interesting conversations that we have here on the Kev Baker Show, they involve the nature of our reality. They involve things like time, the nature of it, our perceptions of it, and all the good woo in between. Now, we also talk about the nature of reality. Are we living in some kind of simulation? Do we truly have free will, or is it all predetermined for us? And when I was preparing for today's show, I was doing a lot of reading. And I'm really glad I did, because I was learning a lot today that seemed to dot the I's and cross the T's on a lot of unconnected data and not fully formed concepts that I have around topics like the nature of reality, and more specifically, something that has become known as Mandela effects. When I was reading today, I picked out a couple of really good quotes. I'd like to share them with you. And one of them goes something like this. We were being described as the human mind is a meat computer, conscious human beings as puppets dancing to the blind watchmaker's hidden melodies. We often talk about the hidden hand behind the curtain, who's pulling our strings. In recent times, we've even been dipping our toe into whether or not our thoughts are even our own. Well, today, we're going to try and identify the mechanism behind the changing nature of our reality. We're going to attempt, if we can, to decipher the logic of not the Mandela effects engineers, but think of it as mimetic engineers. And to do this, I am joined by somebody who has been a long time listener at TFR. I've seen his name on and off over the years. We've touched base a couple of times. He's even phoned into the show. And his name is Epic Journeyman. Now, unbeknown to me, Epic has been working tirelessly on all of the stuff that I've just laid out there in that off-the-cuff kind of intro into what is going to be a mind-blowing show tonight. And I know it's going to be mind-blowing because Epic's been researching this for years. Literally years. His ideas formulating, solidifying, maybe changing over time, but coming into focus in recent times and really getting into what I would call the science of the Mandela effects. Let's call it mimetic engineering. You know, to give you a taste of Epic and his research into the Mandela effects, he's been on a BBC radio show. He's been interviewed for The New Statesman. He's also been in touch with an actor who claims he was never in a film that we're about to learn about in a moment that seemingly didn't exist. And not only that, but he is the moderator of the Mandela effects, or one of the Mandela effects subreddits over on Reddit. And he was telling me there's something like over 150,000 users on there, and he's moderator for all of that. It puts him in a unique position to speak to us tonight about his theory, his ideas as to what the heck is going on, what the changing reality all around us is all about. And dare I say it, we're going to get a grand unified theory. So without any further ado, And I am on the edge of my seat here. I'm so excited. There's going to be quantum mechanics. There's going to be CERN. There's going to be D waves. There's going to be quantum electrodynamics. There's going to be new forces. There's going to be light into matter. Oh, it's all here tonight, folks. And it's thanks to the work of Epic Journey, man. It's been an epic journey getting you here. So welcome to the show, dude.
Aloha, Kev Baker show. Yeah, it's lovely to be here, man. Took a while, but I finally made it. Yeah, 187,000 people on that subreddit, but I haven't done it all though. They got guys over there and girls that put in some work, but yeah, it's a lot of work.
That is a lot of work, and like I was saying to you today, it's kind of a quantum effect, right? Because in one hand, I'm glad I've not been following your Mandela effect research, and on the other hand, I'm absolutely gutted. I'm glad because today, when I got it all condensed down over maybe 4 years of work that you've put together, I got the information download that, like I said in intro, it dots many I's, it crosses many T's for me. It made things that were nonsensical actually make sense. And I can't wait for you to share that with the audience today. But I really think the best place for us to start would be where it all started for you, Epic, because a certain movie that many people know existed seemingly didn't exist. Talk to us about Shazam.
It was a crazy experience for me to find out that movie disappeared because I used to run a video store with my uncle in Las Vegas, and I had ordered 2 copies of that movie. So, and I'd seen it multiple times. I had to watch it when people returned it, claiming there was something wrong with it, because it would happen often. People would bring it; they'd think it was an adult-themed kind of comedy, right? And they'd get home and realize it was a kids' movie. And then, it started really good. It had a really funny beginning, and then just went all the, pardon, what the hell after that, because it wasn't edited properly. It wasn't really finished. That was my view of it. Excuse me. But and it wasn't that long of a movie. There's only like 80. I think it was less than 90 minutes long. But they'd bring it back and say, "Hey, there's something wrong with this movie, man." And it got such a nuisance to me that I'd tell people not to even rent it. So it's not like this is something that, like, a lot of people remember this movie as something they saw when they were a kid, or they saw it on the shelf of a video store, or they think, maybe I confused it with something else. No. I've seen it multiple times, and the beginning was actually quite good, right? And after about been out of the business maybe 10 years, maybe more longer than that, 15 years, I want to say. I was reading through an article on my homepage. I forget which browser it was. I think it might have been Yahoo, but and there was just some little tidbit there about people can't find the Genie movie with Sinbad in it. It was just like a little comment somebody made on Twitter or something. And I saw that, so I'm going to find that. I know all about that movie. I'll put it into this right now. It's going to be easy for me, right? So that got me looking, and sure enough, I can't find anything, but well, okay, no problem. I'll give my uncle a call, and he's had the video store. He sold it, but we might have still some records or something, right? So I start looking into that venue, and along the way, I joined Reddit, right? First, I just go there and I find the subreddit for the Mandela effect, and this is in 2016. So this is about April, I want to say, is when I first learned about it not existing. April, May, somewhere in there, and I just kind of lingered there for a while. I didn't really join right away. I just, read a lot of stuff, and some of the things affected me, some of them didn't. I mean, I wasn't affected by Mandela dying in prison. That didn't feel that at all. But then I started seeing all these other things, and it's like, well, wait a minute, I've experienced this too, right? So I started when you first experience your first real Mandela effect. Like, to me, the Sinbad movie wasn't a Mandela effect. It was just a missing movie. I mean, I'm going to find it, right? In my mind, I'm still going to find it. So, but I started seeing these things like the VW logo was one that got me right away, because I had purchased one with my friend. He had to rebuild his car back in 1987. He had to paint it, and he broke it, right? And he went to go buy a new one, and they didn't have the one with it was continued through on the logo, and it had the one he bought had a gap. So I don't want that one. I want the one from the 1961 or 62 Beetle. And he ordered it, and he got it too. He actually got it. So that's the thing. I mean, I know it existed, right? And then all these other ones we all start to know and love down the course of the way. But it was in August, I want to say, of 2016 that I experienced the Mandela effect that convinced me it was real. I mean, up to that point, I mean, I'd gotten wild. I felt that sense of, losing your feet from under you, that deja vu kind of sensation. It's not hard to explain. It's a cognitive dissonance, but it lingers. It doesn't go away. It does. It's not like something like deja vu that goes away. It keeps you digging.
Yeah, it's a very uncomfortable feeling. It kind of knocks you off kilter. And like I shared with you earlier on the Shazam story, I mean, I lived in a really small village. We didn't have a big blockbuster. It was just our local grocer that had a little cupboard with like maybe a wall of videos that we could rent out. And that was one that I remember because we would always go, well, we get that. Or somebody would always say, well, we get that. And we'd just laugh and go, no, that looks utter tripe. It looks garbage. Do you know what I mean? And
it was,
too. I can't say I ever watched it because I'm like you. Like you explained in one of your interviews I was listening to today, I was more a sci-fi kind of guy or horror, something like that. I was never, kind of family comedy. That's not the sort of thing you watch with your mates when you're a teenager,
Right. Yeah, and I was 30 years old, I want to say, when this happened. And so when I discovered the effect, I was much longer. This was 1993-ish, about when I had the movie. And I ordered from a place called Major Video Concepts from their weekly flyer, and it was a discount tape. See, that's the thing too. It was a VHS tape, and it wasn't like a major production. It was like a bargain bin thing. You got 2 for 1 if you order it with another movie, or you got that one by itself. So about 1 by itself and 1 with a twofer, which to this day I know it had a rainbow logo on it, and we'll get into that a little bit in a minute, but continue with what got me to really be stunned and learn of the effect and be convinced, and that was the Apollo 13 flip-flop. And I experienced that firsthand, full bore, and was stunned to find out other people have experienced it at a completely different time before me, and continued to experience it for at least 2 years, almost 2 years afterwards. Different whole groups of people, but when you would go look to see if it changed, it wouldn't be there. Not what you saw, right? But they saw it for the first time. And that's just not possible. And it's not a memory, right? That's something you saw firsthand. You were watching. You maybe were convinced, in the case like my case, that it was really the other way. The scene was the other way. It was from over the shoulder, and they came in, and then it's Houston, we've had a problem, instead of Houston, we have a problem. The dramatic way we know it, where it's a close up, of Tom Hanks. Houston, we have a problem, right? It's like it's on the cover of the tape, right, of the poster. But for like a week, those of us who were in that thread that were reading it were like, we've had a problem. It was a different camera angle. It lacked some of that drama. And we just admitted to ourselves. We all kind of agreed. That's the way Reddit used to work more back then. It's more lifetime over the span of the life of a thread. And we're like, well, I guess we're wrong. We're just wrong. It's, the real tapes say that. So maybe that's this is strictly the movie we're talking about, but we're thinking, okay, that's maybe historically accurate. And when it changed back, it knocked everybody, off their feet, right? And that's not a memory. That's something you saw firsthand. That actually physically changed. And the only other one that I personally saw was the Back to the Future van. Back to the Future van's a VW van. But same thing, for about a week, it was this Toyota van, right? And everything you looked at was a Toyota van. And then it changed back to a VW van. So that's where I really became, I joined Reddit by then and got really intrigued by it and really started researching it, because I thought there might be a technology behind that. That could be done by hijacking an IP address and changing something digitally. It can, right?
Yeah.
And that makes sense. That does make sense. Like, why would you do that though? And that's where we'll get a little bit later on to the mimetic engineering side of it. But the Sinbad thing, I continued to do that. And I wrote a article, not an article, my first kind of long post that I did after I joined. It was in October. Is that when it was posted? And it was Sinbad Genie movie complete analysis. And I wrote everything that I knew about the Sinbad movie that I could remember up to that time. I remember more after that, but that's what I remembered when I wrote it. And I tried to debunk myself along the way. So I tried to debunk myself. I said, well, it could be being confused with the movie House Guest, where his head's coming out of a mailbox. Sinbad, the actor, his head's coming out of a mailbox. It looks kind of like a genie coming out of a lamp. So maybe that's what it is. And I just did all kinds of things to explain, like two sides of the debate, right? And of course, my memory went out because there's no way it could be any of those things. There's too many other details. But it got the attention of Amelia Tate, who is a freelance journalist and wrote for Vice and New Statesman and some other magazines. And she made a article called "The Movie That Doesn't Exist and the Redditors Who Believe It Does." and it posted just a couple days before Christmas in 2016. And then at that moment, that is when the Mandela effect, not saying just that article, but it really caught on because of that. And it got a lot more attention towards me than I was expecting, because I was featured in that article. She interviewed me for it. And she's a delight to talk to, by the way. She's awesome. But, and then that got the attention of BBC. So I ended up getting an interview with the Digital Human about that. And prior to going on the show, because we knew it was a couple months ahead, I was going to go to a PBS studio to record. I went to Las Vegas and raided my uncle's storage bin and tried to find the people who bought the video store, and did all kinds of like real detective work on this, and could not find any evidence of it at all. Nothing. I mean, it virtually and truly disappeared. So, and we recorded some of that for the show. So you get to hear it if you listen to that radio show. There's the background noise and me going through the storage bin and everything. But looking at the stuff that we did have, the receipts we did have, I mean, it totally reminded me of buying it and seeing the same receipts. You know how it is when you see something that you used to do all the time. It just reminds you what it looks like. And you're like, oh, yeah, this is exactly, I had the same receipt, but it just said, the Sinbad Genie movie instead of the ones we were looking at. And we're missing 1993 and part of 1994 almost entirely. My uncle had the store from 1991 to 2000, and I worked in it most of that time. I had a break in between, but so from 1991, 1993, 4, I was there pretty consistently. Then I went to electrical apprenticeship, and then things needed help later in the evenings. I'd work there till eventually sold it in 2000, and I moved from Vegas to San Diego. So, so that's a story about that. So that's I continue to research that movie though, and we can kind of take it from there if you want to go more with that or go with the other research where it led me.
Yeah, take a look. We'll spend a bit more time on the movie, but I must say, the New Statesman article and the BBC interview, I thought they were very, very fair. The article in particular was really well written. I hadn't ever come across this article until you'd linked it to me today. But the writer, I think she done a very good job of explaining the kind of phenomena that people were, like you say, it hadn't quite picked up that breakneck speed yet at that point. But it's certainly, whether this was the catalyst for that or whether shenanigans went up a notch at that point, we can get into that later. I don't know what came first, but yeah, the BBC, the radio show you done, and I'll link all of this in the show notes, because I'm also going to link all of the information that you sent me in the order that you sent me it, Epic, because I think it really is a really good thread if you read through everything in the order you gave it to me. It lays out everything that we're going to get into tonight in even deeper fashion. So, yeah, more about this movie, man. And I know there were some people that say that people like you, they're all getting confused because there was another movie that came out called Kazam. Is that right?
That's right. It came out later in 1996 and had Shaquille O'Neal. And there's a huge difference in these movies. I mean, number one, Sinbad movie came out much earlier, not like way earlier, but about 2 years earlier, at least, maybe 3. And if people were familiar with the rental business, VHS rental business from back then, you'd leave movies on the new release shelf or thereabouts, the recent release shelf for a long time. They'd be up there for years. It wasn't like they'd just go away after a couple months, unless it was a Blockbuster or something like that, maybe. But the mom and pop stores, they'd leave them up there, until they paid for themselves, basically. And even then, they might leave them up for everyone to view. And you got to think about this too. The amount of eyes on that this movie had, before I describe a little bit more about the movie, is huge. I mean, even if it was only a small amount of stores, let's say 300 stores total in the whole world, right, that had this tape. Like, it wasn't really supposed to be released, let's say, but people got it. Compare that to 300 movie screens over the span of years. 300 people. I mean, how many people a day pass through a store and get eyes on at least the cover, or pick up the cover and read the cover, let alone actually watch the movie? So it can affect tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people over that span. And it has, because a lot of people remember it, but they remember also these specific details. And the specific details are that it's a single dad, it's in suburbia, right? And it's a a boy and a girl. The boy's an older sibling. There's a brother and sister, and a little girl. And the little girl is like really reminiscent of Mara Wilson. She's only about 5 at the time, maybe a really cute little girl with her doll. And then there's the guy's kind of like Jonathan Taylor Thomas is her older brother, who's like teenage, maybe 13, 14-ish, somewhere in there, still a kid, but, just becoming a nuisance teenager, basically, right? And they interact the most. They're really the stars of the show that interact with Sinbad. It's all about them. The dad doesn't even know about him the whole time until later, way later in the movie. So it's all about their hijinks, and he gets taken to work with, at the dad's work by accident, and in the bottle lamp, and there's a scene about that. And the original Discovery scene, when I first remember, I was thinking about the scene in the living room, because it does appear in the living room. They rub the lamp, the kids are fighting or something. He comes up there by the fireplace. But the original Discovery scene, as I relate it later, is in the attic, because they get this steamer trunk. They're moving in the house. That's how the movie starts. It's a big departure from Kazam. Kazam's just this boombox wielding genie in a building that's about to be destroyed, and this little boy finds him, and there's no similarity whatsoever. In this case, they're moving into this house. It's like the mom has died, or maybe there's divorce or something, but you get the impression she died. I'm pretty sure she did. And one of the things that comes coming out of the moving truck, or comes as delivered, is a steamer trunk, and there's a bunch of junk in the trunk. No pun intended, right? And they go and they pull out like there's like a picture frame, and there's nothing in it, and there's this other just like a clothes hanger or something, and then there's this lamp, this bottle. It's almost like the Trimagini bottle more than the lamp, really, and it's from like the aunt or something, right? And they put it upstairs, I mean, it's from somebody. It's not like the stuff they originally moved in with, and the kids go later and go up in the attic to go dig into it. Right. And that's when they discovered the genie. And I relayed this story. I got contacted via email and Twitter. I think it might have been Twitter. I just joined Twitter afterwards. But it could have been even a private message from Reddit. I was looking for it for the show. But this guy identifies himself as, hey, I'm writing a script for College Humor. And, I was hoping you could describe the scene to me, the discovery scene for the movie. It's really going to help me out, et cetera, et cetera. And in the context of me reading through it, I thought it was like some kid in a screenwriting class in college, right? I didn't realize it was actually this organization called College Humor. I feel kind of silly about it now in retrospect. But so it turns out College Humor is this production company. And I described the entire production, the discovery scene of how the kids discover the genie. And about a month after that, not quite a month, like about 3 weeks, that's when I had the interview with the BBC for Digital Human. And but in between that time, April Fools had come, right? So by the time it premieres, I do the interview, but I haven't heard the recorded, how it came out until after. So in that span, the College Humor video about the discovery scene of the Sinbad in the bottle in the attic came out, and it was April Fool's joke for Sinbad. It came out awesome. It came out really good. It's almost exactly how I described it. I was really kind of surprised, but really pleased too of how well it came out. So, I want to bring that up because that's how involved I was early on with this, right? Like this is really like something I was deeply involved with. It's not something that
you really
I just picked up
I was surprised today, Epic. I really was, and you told me you'd researched it for years, and you have to appreciate that. I get approached by maybe multiple people a day that tell me they research this and research that. And, I only know once we get to the showtime if it's research or it's researched. And to say that you've been at the center of this, absolutely. And like I said to you, you're uniquely placed in a way. Because as a moderator over on Reddit, goodness grief, your eyes must want to bleed most of the time with some of the stuff that comes in, right? But you've got a real-time feed of a real big demographic there, a big number of people, nearly 200,000 people it's up to now, and you're watching people's experiences, their witness testimonies, basically, on how their reality is being affected, and you're getting to see that almost in real time. And I think you're probably one of the best people to speak to some aspects of this because of that. And as we're going to get into it as the show goes on, there's people that say the Mandela effect, it doesn't trigger them. We've got you covered. There's people that say that the Mandela effect, it triggers them. we've got you covered. There's people that see Mandela effects everywhere. We've got you covered. And we've barely scratched the surface here. Now, we're about to go to the break. Tell people where they can follow along with the Reddit stream and give them your social media as well, brother.
Yeah, so you can follow along at Reddit at rmandelaeffect.com.
And we'll get that when we come right back after the... Standing tall in the face of tyranny. And standing tall, trying to decipher reality. Oh, it's a strange old world that we live in. And in particular, since I would say maybe, for me anyway, after 2012, it seems to have got increasingly strange. And of course, it was after 2012, in the aftermath of that, that I myself became aware of Mandela effects. And I know there's people out there that have never been affected. I know there's people that are supremely affected all the time. And then you've got everyone else in between. And today I've got Epic Journeyman. He is here with me to go over his theory on the... I hate to keep calling it Mandela effects, but we haven't got to the part of the show yet where we really swap that phrase for what's really going on here in Epic's opinion. And I must admit, I think I'm on board with where Epic's coming from here. So, Epic, I'm going to come back to you. And because we got kind of interrupted by the break, please let people know again where they can follow you. And then let's get right back into this, brother.
Yeah, so I'm a Epic Journeyman on everything on social media. So I have a YouTube channel. So that's Epic Journeyman, right? Capital E, capital J, capital M. And then I do a radio show with Jimmy Jean on Friday nights on Revolution Radio, 11 p.m. Pacific time. He's doing okay, by the way. He had to abandon ship there for the fires. He's going to be back in a couple of days. And I also am on Twitter, Twitter, same thing, Epic Journeyman. And then, of course, that's my handle on Mandela Effect. So it's R Mandela Effect. If you go to the subreddit, it's just R / Mandela Effect, capital M, capital E.
And a big shout out to Jimmy Jeans. I forgot to even mention in my intro today. I was meant to open with that, but he said to tell everyone he's okay. He bailed out, like Epic said. FEMA Region 9, he added into his comment. And yeah, just to echo what Epic said there, he's safe. Him and his mum are okay. He mentioned looters and things like that. It's getting kind of cray-cray there. And then, of course, down in another part of America, they're getting ready for the big storm coming in. You've already got people going crazy on the streets. We could probably do a whole other show on that, Epic. But tonight, let's keep on at the, dare I say it, Mandela effects. Where do you want to go next with this, Epic?
Yeah, so I think the first place to go is kind of follow how I developed what I think is a pretty good summation of where this kind of is going, and it maybe has gone. And it started with me when I first realized that it was real. I mean, there's no question it's real. I mean, it's not just something that you misremembered. You go by that. You look, you try to go through, is it confirmation bias? Is it a confabulation? Certainly there's confabulation comes in there and that kind of thing. You start researching those things to see how often it happens. You read about like the balloon ride that nobody went on or getting lost in the mall.
And that was offered to people because I became aware that there was people out there that just ridiculous. Everything was the way they remember it. And I can't tell them that they are wrong. So what I used to say was treat it like deja vu, because I've never seen anyone question anybody having deja vu, right? It's not something you kind of snigger at, roll your eyes and nudge people and go, look at that lunatic making it up, because we've all experienced a bit of deja vu. It's like the paranormal. Just because you haven't experienced it yet, it doesn't mean it's not out there. So I always used to say that to the people that hadn't experienced this. And then when I read through where you're going today, that's kind of covered because we can kind of explain why there are some people like that. But just to come back to you, sorry to interrupt you there, brother. I'm super excited.
It's perfect. It's perfect. I mean, so...
Yeah, it gets hectic.
So we're going to get to that for sure. One of the things I learned as a moderator early on is you got to make the same arguments over and over for people who try to think you're just misremembering, right? Or, well, Occam's razor says whatever, right? And of course, Occam's razor applies to the example of the Apollo 13 flip-flop. We all saw it. So either it really happened, and it did, it's something that explained it, right? What is it? So that's a technological potential one there, right? But the other thing is you describe it like it's like seeing Bigfoot or a UFO. Let's use Bigfoot for this one. If you go and your family's there and Bigfoot comes to your campground, walks up to your picnic table, kids running and hide in the tent, grabs your Fritos, looks at you and runs off. You smell the horrible smell as it walks up, and it's 8 feet tall and you're all traumatized. And it's definitely a biped. It's broad daylight, right? Your wife sees it, everybody sees it, and then you go tell your friends, "Hey, I just saw Bigfoot." You're all too flabbergasted by the experience to grab your cell phone. You're out camping, for Christ's sake. You probably don't have reception, right? And they say, "No, you just saw a bear. It's just a bear. It's a bear standing up there. That's all it is, just a bear." Like, no, man, it was broad daylight. It was 3 PM, right? You know what you saw. You cannot tell somebody who saw that it's something different. They know what they saw, and they get really offended when you try to tell them what they saw because they weren't there. They're not a witness to it. Well, that's the same thing with Mandela effect, and that's why the name effect is appropriate. It's not just the experience. As we're describing experience like it's paranormal there, and it is. It's very similar things to that, but it's also the fact that it affects you. It's what you feel when it happens. Just like you get that weird feeling when you see a ghost. If you've ever had a paranormal experience with a ghost, you get a weird feeling associated with it. When you see a UFO, you don't notice that same sense. That's the same kind of sense you get with the Mandela effect. The only difference is that it, like I said, it lasts longer because you want to find an answer. When the ghost disappears, the apparition's gone. You can't really chase it. When Bigfoot goes in the woods, you can't really find him. You go looking for the footprints, and that's what we do with the effect. You go looking for what they call residue, right? And in true Mandela effect form, if Mandela effect was timelines or something like that, like a lot of people theorize, there wouldn't really be, or multiverse even, there wouldn't really be footprints, right? Because it's not in this parallel dimension, the one that's in the old one, right? So, or the other universe. So that's part of the problem with it. But there are some things that have that, and that's why you have to make a distinction between the three kinds of effects. There's things that we remember that changed, right? Things that changed. There's things that disappeared, right? That completely disappeared, that vanished, right? Those are some of the best. I like those ones a lot. And then there's the ones that are flip flops.
Give me an example of the kind of the ones that disappear.
So obviously the Sinbad genie movie would be the daddy of them all for when it disappeared. But another great one, and this is, I have a real great interest in cryptozoology, always did as a kid, and paranormal as a little kid too, not a little kid, but teenager and all through. And I always try to solve those riddles, right? And so one of those that got me, and I was a big Dinosaur fan. So it's two of the earliest recorded Mandela effects, before they were called Mandela effects, deal with something called the Tombstone Thunderbird. And the Tombstone Thunderbird is this, it's described like a pterodactyl, right? That was shot by these ranchers in Tombstone, Arizona. And they had a picture of it. It ran in the Tombstone Gazette newspaper. And there's people who claim to handle the photo. They've seen it as late as the 60s, and it really generated a lot of publicity in the 90s, people going amok looking for it. I remember this picture. I saw it too. Totally. I remember reading the article and seeing the picture, but it's gone. It's not there. And the other one's one called the Bolton Museum Dinosaur. And that's from 2006. And so Fiona Broom, who coined the term Mandela effect, created it in 2009. So in 2006, you have this article in the, I forget the magazine, Bolton Times, something. That's in Manchester, your neck of the woods there, right? Yep. In northern England. And people remember seeing this dinosaur, this huge dinosaur, out when you walk in the entrance right there. And people come, where's the dinosaur, right? And they swear this dinosaur is there, and it's never been there. So like in all Mandela effects, there's something that just blows your mind. It's the fact that it's never been there at all that's what's so disturbing, right? How can all these people remember this dinosaur? It's a big dinosaur, right? How can people remember this photo? I mean, going back, I remember reading it as a kid and reading it all the way up until, books and stuff, all the way into, oh gosh, man, at least my early 20s, 30s. And I remember specifically, I read all those cryptozoology books. I read Heuvelmans, who's a famous cryptozoologist, a book called The Maybe Monsters, like everything that was ever out there. All John Keel's, stuff, there's Mothman Prophecy. It's not real cryptozoology.
Now you're talking.
But I'm well versed in that, right? That kind of thing. And of course, I read Alien Agenda by Jim Marrs, which is along with Jacques Vallée, who's a UFO researcher, French UFO researcher that's kind of depicted in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. That's the guy that's a French scientist in the movie. It's supposed to be him. Anyway, point is, they were the first ones to make the idea that it's a multidimensional thing. Like up to that point, everybody was still thinking UFOs, for example, were spaceships, and Bigfoot was an actual creature. But they were the first ones to propose, including Mothman, that they were multidimensional, that they're coming from another realm. They weren't actually from this realm. And that ties in, we're going to get to that a little bit with the Mandela effect, because I'm with you. I wish it had a better name. I always have. It's just because we do polls on the subreddit. I know we've been tracking every single reported effect since 2017, the date that they were reported, and then we track them through the year, and we have a Mandela effect of the year thing at the end of the year to vote on which one we want to name the best effect of the year. It's really a way just tracking them, but it's also we have these polls quarterly, and I think I missed the last one actually, but we vote on the everybody's supposed to say there's three best and one worst effect, right? And the Mandela effect namesake consistently is named the worst, you know. And I'm not saying people don't experience it, but it's funny.
I am not Mandela affected. The whole Mandela one, no, it only happened the once for me. And like you, I kind of sometimes I wish it was named something else. And I know Fiona Broom herself. She's an interesting part in this story, hasn't she?
Yes.
Very.
Yeah. The Dragon Conference. She was a paranormal researcher. Still is, as far as I know. Yeah. And one of the things that's interesting about her is, okay, so the Mandela Effect subreddit was created long before I got there in 2013. I first visited on Reddit in 2016, chasing down the Sinbad movie. But Fiona Broom named it in 2009 at a thing called the Dragon Conference, which is a paranormal conference. And she started a website. And the website tracked people's reports from that time up through about mid-2000, I think it might have been early 2016. And it was weird because there was this trickle of effects that was reported from the time it first started, 2009, was a big boom. In her own words, she describes it. If you go to MandelaEffect.com, it's back up right now. You can read it there on Fiona Broom's website. That in 2015, the floodgates opened, and in 2016 was this huge wave. Well, during 2016, she was approached by people supposedly to stop reporting on the effect. Now, she says on her website now that she had crashes all the time, which I don't doubt. And it was causing problems there too. And I was looking actually last night for a reference when it was kind of shut down, because it was for a while.
It's back up now. I've just gone there now. It's back up, and yeah, periodically it just kind of disappears.
Yeah, yes, it does. Yes, it does. And I tied that into this article. And it's a good place, a good segue to get there about. So I originally thought it was a psyop. When I first learned of it and realized it was real, I thought it was a psyop. And I wrote that in a post, and it got deleted because the moderators at the time didn't like it. You know, this is 2016. And then later on, I wrote an article called Google and the Transhuman Agenda, because I felt it was really tied to transhumanism. And we'll talk about that a little bit. And it had to be something as powerful as Google, basically, to gather this information and disseminate it, use it that way. And it made a lot of sense at the time. I found more things since, but that was there. And then down the road, I got into this idea of mimetic engineering. And it turns out that makes a heck of a lot of sense. What happened was, when I wrote that article, I described two of the incidents where I made the statement in that post that what we were experiencing is a test of mimetic engineering that's gone live. Because it's described in a 1999 article in Wired magazine. You read from it at the beginning of the show.
Yep, that's right. Yep.
From it. And it's frightening as all heck, actually, because what the idea is, and I want to point this out to people because I think it's really relevant. I've been only hearing the word meme since maybe 2010. How about you, Kev? I've about 2010, maybe, right? Somewhere in there. Yeah. Kind of the advent of social media, right?
Yeah.
Everybody thinks of it like, you know, somebody writes or makes these memes and posts them online, and you copy them and put them in your post somewhere, right? So that's what people think of as a meme. But in reality, it was first coined, that the term was coined by Richard Dawkins, who's the famous atheist, right? He's known more for being an atheist than a scientist in a lot of ways. But he wrote a book called The Selfish Gene in 1976. And he proposed that a meme right? An action, something that's remembered, a funny quirk, whatever, right? A body motion, an idea, right?
Yeah.
These things are like genes and are maybe more relevant than genes in behavior. And not only that, but they're passed on generation to generation, not unlike how genetic information is. So in other words,
I think he actually described it. I thought it was brilliant. It almost described as a unit, like a measurement of culture.
yes.
Yeah, one unit of culture, an idea, a belief, a pattern, a behavior, etc., which is hosted in the minds of one or more individuals, and which can reproduce itself in the sense of jumping from the mind of one person to the mind of another. I think that's really well put, that, and I think that's quite important here. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, definitely. And that's what when you looked at it when the article was written in 1999, they were lamenting over the fact of how much influence that could have over people. That with because it's designed to build culture and society, literally society from the ground up, to have things take and stick, like like a mind worm, so to speak. But but it's behavior, it's traits that are passed on, and just by being exposed to them. It's not. It's like a little bit. It's almost like I didn't like the movie, but like Bird Box, right? You can't unsee it. Right.
Yeah.
It's kind of the idea. And during the interview on the BBC, we had some great guests on there. I recommended Nick Bostrom. I had never met Nick Bostrom, but because of his simulation theory hypothesis that he made famous, kind of quoting from Philip K. Dick, but he was the first scientist that did it, really proposed it. And he did. He came on the show. But there's another guy I wasn't expecting to be there, several actually, but his name was Donald P. Hoffman. And he proposed the idea of a social contagion. And that's exactly what this is. It's a social contagion as well. The idea that the social contagion spreads like a virus throughout society, right? And so if you look at this, I brought up the Fiona, excuse me, I can't pronounce anything today, Fiona Broom website, because I wanted to point something about this peak and valley. So there's this acceleration dramatically in 2015. And then in 2016, huge wave. And then it's still strong, 2017. Then it starts tapering down. The number of reported effects starts tapering down, right? There's still good ones, but it tapers down. 2018, a little more, still quite a few. And then last year, very few. And this year, only 2 or 3 for the whole year so far that are actually new, strong effects, right? And if you look at it, and you could draw a vector map, or like these maps you see for the COVID transmission. It's flattening the curve. It's this actual peak, this start, this peak, and this drop, right? And it's undeniable when you look at it, like how it manifested and where it is now, right? And so what you start to realize is maybe the Mandela effect, like a social contagion or memetic engineering, is spread. But it also might be an event that's coming to an end. Like this was a live test of memetic engineering for a specific purpose, right? And that it's coming to a close. And I know people still discover the effect every day. They still experience the effect every day. There's newcomers all the time. But what I'm talking about is the actual newly reported effects based on new experiences has dramatically slowed. And it dramatically accelerated in 2015, peaking in 2016. So that's really interesting because of the things that were happening that allowed for the transmission of memetic engineering to work, right? We're at that time, the peaks of social media, Twitter coming out, of all these things that could carry that social contagion, right? And there's another very, very interesting thing to point out, that there seems to be an end date, like an expiration date for things that cause the Mandela effect. I'm talking about things that cause it, that not when you discover it, but where they're generated from. And again, you see this huge number of things in the 20th century that started in the 20th century, and they go back farther, but specifically 20th century. And then they drop in 1998. I mean, inexplicably, there's a huge drop off of things that were created prior to 1998. I mean, and it goes like that to 2005. There's only a handful of newly reported effects based on things that created in that time, to where now, since 2009, there's almost nothing. I mean, there's been a few claims, and they're not very, in my opinion, very good ones. I know one was an Overwatch game. It's a Blizzard game, but I know a guy who works at Blizzard who told me that was a hoax. So that's not true. And then the other one is Beats by Dre, which is not very good because they have both on the website at Best Buy, Beats by Dre and Beats by themselves. Not exactly a powerful persuasion. If you're trying to describe Mandela effect to somebody, you wouldn't use that, right? So why is that? Why is that? Did it end at that time? So we can look a little later. I think we're probably coming up soon on a break, right?
About what? 7 minutes left. You're okay, bro.
Oh, okay.
You're doing great
good.
here, man. Hey,
So,
keep going.
Yeah. So what this got me thinking about is during this time frame, after I'd already looked into, let's go back a little bit to the Google and transhuman agenda and why I thought that was relevant and why I thought that might be what it was. It occurred to me that knowing what I know about transhumanism, we've talked about it a lot on this show. The idea is to be able to transfer consciousness into another vessel. So you're going to die, and your physical body, but you want to be able to transfer your body, your consciousness rather, into another form. It doesn't have to be a body. It could be a mainframe. It could be a robot, an android, whatever, or another person. Well, there's something really important about that, and it's like a body that has an organ transplant, right? And it rejects the organ. You need to be sure that if you transfer your consciousness into another vessel, that you're not going to freak out and reject it. Like it's going to be so different than what you expect, right? You're not going to remember or see the same thing because it's not going to be a complete transmutation, right? Because the computing still isn't there to transfer everything about your personality, every quirk of your memory, everything you've ever experienced into this vessel, right? It's going to be good. It'll be as good as it can be from gathering data points, but it won't be perfect. So what happens when you wake up and it isn't perfect? What things in your memory that you still remember, right, are going to, if they're missing or they're different, will you reject, right? So it occurred to me that they might do that. I mean, that might be something to test. Like what is so strong that to some people they cling to an associative kind of memory that they won't let go. They won't change their mind. I mean, who would think that something like, Interview with the Vampire, which is such an easy explanation for some people, right, would be such a big deal to some people, or that, the Forrest Gump quote, silly things they should be. But why would that, if you think about it, that something like that causes you to reject the reality you're living in now? What's it going to cause when you go into this other vessel and are missing, 30% of your memories, right? Those anchor memories that anchored who you are and made you who you are. And we're going to get into how that, I think it's a great segue, how that's tied to entanglement, and that memory itself is probably quantum based.
Absolutely, dude. Absolutely. And, I think it's probably important as well when we're talking about Google and we're starting to factor in this kind of this digitization of the consciousness, going very technological, digital. That's the right term to use. And we're also going to be talking a lot about psychology. We're going to be leaning on that heavily going forward in the show as well. And we always know that they've done experiments on people. Back in the day, you can think of experimentation being done in the lab, sometimes on large groups of people in a very, localized, controlled area. And that was good, but it only provided, very limited data. And only now, I think you would agree, and I think this ties in with where we're going and why things have really picked up pace. It's only now in this digital age where really they can monitor us near enough down to our very thoughts in real time, thanks to the technology that's all around us, thanks to the throughput of the data that's increasing all of the time. One of my major concerns around 5G is more the aspect of the data throughput and the amount of engineering that can be done on the back of our data, as opposed to some of the more talked about health concerns. And we are living in this more technical world now, this more digital world, Epic, where you are able to do experiments on a vastly greater scale across a global playing field, right?
Yes, exactly. And we give permission for them to do it. Every time we sign one of those end user agreements, end user license agreements, without reading through it, even if you do read through it, you still say, I'm going to accept it anyway. You're giving permission for them to do it. And Facebook got caught several times doing that, and doing tests and trying to alter your psychology, right? Through using negative ads, not just negative ads, but negative news articles to alter your mood and see how you behaved. And when they got caught, they didn't deny it.
So, what's quite ironic about that is the fact that most of us rushed over to this very same Facebook to talk about it.
Yeah, I know, right?
We realized we were being engineered. We realized they were playing with us, and we decided we'll talk about this and we'll show our outrage on the very same platform. Bang, they got us good.
Oh, they did, and there was a great article that was brought to the table on the show. It was on your show actually, where you brought up what do you call it, the LifeLog project.
Yeah, Scotty Lopez brought that up.
Scotty Lopez brought it up. Yeah, kudos to Scotty. So I was in the process of looking through all this. Exactly when I was looking at the transhuman agenda, Google transhuman agenda, and all these experiments were being done. And that came to the table, and it turned out that LifeLog project from DARPA ended literally the exact day that Facebook launched, which cannot possibly be a coincidence, right? Can't.
Not even in the holographic nature of reality that we live. I wouldn't think so. Now, we're almost on the break again, so don't go too deep into anything here, Epic. In fact, I'll let the audience know that tomorrow, the aforementioned Scotty Lopez, he's going to be here with me on the show. And please stay tuned after today's show, because Quantum Connections will be coming on. And, of course, I'll be back tomorrow on YouTube with a pre-show stream. There was no pre-show stream today because when I started to dive down this rabbit hole, or should I call it a cosmic canyon, I really dedicated all of my time and my focus and my energy on this because I really do think this is very important. And still, 1 hour in, I think we're only scratching the surface. Stay tuned. We will be right back. Our number 2 on today's, pardon the pun, epic show about, well, let's forget Mandela effects per se, and let's start to change the language, the nomenclature, like the kind of terminology that we use about the science behind the changing of our very reality, or our perception of it. And it's mimetic engineering. So to do this, we've got Epic Journeyman, long-time listener to this show, to the network. He's a long-time researcher and very active in the Mandela Effect community, running the subreddit, or helping to, sorry. He's a member of a team that helps to moderate over there. Over 190,000 people on that subreddit, r/Mandela Effects, capital M, capital E. And I'm going to pass it back to you now, Epic. Where would you like to go from here? Because we kind of touched on memetics, maybe the psychology of what's going on. Where do you want to pick it up, brother?
Yeah, so there's a very real psychological aspect to this. But I think before we go into psychology, maybe we should go and lead with what might actually be at the basis of this is a war, if you want to call it that, between two ways of thought, right? One is that of the scientific materialist, right? So the scientific materialist wants everything to be mathematically explained in an equation, explained, with a burden of proof being able to be replicated, where everything is accounted for and observable at all times. Basically a digital view of the world, right? And then there's the kind of more spiritually tuned people, the people who look at not just necessarily call it spiritual, but the philosophical view, the kind of a Plato view, if you will, of consciousness creating reality in a way, allowing for that, in the randomness of life, the randomness of nature, the fractal nature of the universe, right? The unexplainable kind of quantum effects. And those people have a completely different view. And it's an analog view, right? So analog allows for, in a sense, it allows for evolution to happen, right? Because the randomness of nature can only take place when something goes out of the norm, when something different, unpredictable happens. It's not something that's predictable necessarily. Oh, that can happen too. So it's, if you think about it in a way, it's analog versus digital. And I'm going to point out before we go on that does tie into that 2009 date, because starting in 1998 and going through 2008, was the transition from analog transmissions of TV signals and all kinds of data to digital television. And it's also the advent of cellular technology and cellular data, and where Wi-Fi became more prevalent and digital encoding became more commonplace. So this is going to tie in later on. We'll get a little more to about how things react when they're observed in a quantum state. Okay, we know a little bit about that already, but we're going to get more into it. So in the psychology, yeah, there's been an effort, time immemorial, to influence society through steering culture. And this discovery of the effectiveness of memes is huge in doing this, because you can start and steer a culture. They call it, sorry, we have a brief spot there. I'm trying to think of the name for it, but it's mimetic zones, for lack of a better word. Groups of memes that define a whole mindset, a whole personality way, if you want to call it that they can use. And once it's in place, I mean, you could literally, if you were on a spaceship, as an example, and you have 3 ships going to 3 different colonies and 3 different moons of a far distant planet, by setting up that memosphere, I think that's the word they use actually, then you could have 3 completely different cultures generated from that, just from those basic memes that are repeated. It's enough to make the society run. They define religion even as a form of memetic engineering of memospheres.
I ask you, do you think that may play into the commonality? Say like most religions of flood, right? Is that almost like a meme?
I think so. I mean, it may be based in fact. We'll remember this, but
exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And for people out there who have just totally flown off the chair and want to nail me to a cross, but it could be defined, a real event defined as a meme. What you're describing here perfectly, you know.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it uses things like game theory, right? And the idea that you can, it's very cold, calculating, and callous. It's with an intent, right? It's with an intent. So it's not something that just, it can randomly generate, like could be like anything else. It's a pop culture reference and just catches on. But those very things have become memes in their own way, right? But these are packaged. I mean, they're packaged in a way with advertising and things like that. We talk about that in social media and politics and all that kind of thing. But it's the idea of actually using it as a template, right? To define the kind of culture you want to have, the kind of society you want to bring up, to use that as the basic building block to build it all from. And yeah, that's been going on for a long time before it was called memetics, right? But the idea that you could actually do it, I mean, that's what changed, right? The fact that you could actually define something. And there is these people, writers of the times past and 20th century as well, that really had a big influence. People like William S. Burroughs and going back to like Plato talking about consciousness, right? But they had a lot more influence than they have now. And the reason is because it's been distilled, and that's maybe the best word. It's been distilled into these packaged delivery systems, these memes. And so you could actually have an entirely different, like I said, culture in the same, continent, just never really interacted that much, based strictly on just what they learned in that basic packaged form. And so the thing that makes it kind of scary is the delivery systems we have today are there through all this digital media. Like we have it in our homes, right? Through the televisions we watch, the computers we interact with, or electronic devices, all those things. That ties into psychotronics and things like that as well. But the fact that it makes this memory imprint, that it becomes a social contagion, and that it's very hard to shake, right? I mean, how do you become immune from it? You just have to go through it first, right? Well, going through it, you still have the memory, right? So it's a hard thing to shake. How many people can change?
Would you say then that memories and certain memories in particular almost build a consensus reality, quantum conscious kind of framework that reality kind of builds from?
Yes.
That's a really horrible way of put that, but I think you know where I'm coming from, right?
Right. Yeah. So it's a way of it's divisive in a sense, because it's I don't know, for lack of a better word, pasteurizing the homogeneous into this refined, predictable, and controllable package, right? So that's the psychology that goes behind it too. And so the idea of this social contagion and the idea of using these means to stick, right, is big. But when you combine it with artificial intelligence being able to deliver it, right? Because once this is where it gets important is we already know about data points being collected on people and things like that, and we talked about those end user license agreements and how you basically give permission for this to happen. But the other side of this is this quantum side, this idea that something that I've theorized on, and like any kind of theory, it's not provable. I'll share it with everyone for them to think about it and dive in themselves. But the idea that memory itself is based on kind of quantum activity. So you can smell, in quantum mechanics, I'm not an expert in quantum mechanics, but totally dissimilar things can be entangled. So an apple, if it was in the macrocosm, we're talking about particles in mechanics, quantum mechanics, but an apple could be, entangled with an orange or a book. You know what I mean? And the idea that that you could make that work for memory in the sense like you smell a rose and you remember something from your childhood, or you see a picture of a dinosaur and it makes you think of something totally unrelated, like that football game you went to when you were 14, right? So when they collect these data points that they do all the time on people, like we talked about Cambridge Analytica, not me and you, but in the alternative media quite a bit, and regular media, having 5,000 data points on every person. Those are just data points gathered from their activity online, basically, and surveys that fill out and that kind of thing. But what about the things that you learn, which your mind is literally entangled with, that spark another memory? And these anchor memories are the things that will lead to something else, right? So if you can tap into that dissimilar mechanism, then when you go to identify the people that you can influence, you know that a certain percentage of the population is affected by the scent of a rose this way. A certain other percentage of the population sees a race car and thinks of this, right? And the way you find that out is by giving them images to look at, by exposing them to them. And then as that happens more and more, you can package these memes, right, for that specific person and influence that person. But now it becomes a matter of quantum scale things that are somehow involved as well, because if it's our consciousness that creates reality, this agreement reality we're talking about, and it's been theorized, and actually Scientific American made an article 2 years ago, right, 2018, about the idea that maybe what we think of the observer effect, collapsing wave, particle duality, actually works the other way to create as well, kind of giving credence to the idea of the power of intention creating reality, or at least locking it into place, right? So what becomes relevant here is that you can literally alter reality. You can literally alter reality, but it also explains how people can see the same thing two different ways. Right? We can be looking at exactly the same thing, have exactly the same experience. There's a psychology behind that certainly people see things different and have different, world experience that makes them think that way. But I'm thinking that there's actually a way to tap in as a resource to these people to make them deliberately see it, like that virus, like that mental contagion, like that meme catching on. That will make them see it and interpret it a different way. And it makes a lot of sense if you think about this being a long-term study that really launched 10 years ago, right, or more. That
you mean around the time when the D wave first came in?
Yes, exactly right. Yeah.
Funnily enough.
Yes.
Or funnily enough, as it pans out as an epic, because it's very tied to some of this.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. There's no doubt about it, because it became obvious that the quantum realm and the ability to take these dissimilar things and process them all, is not capable of being done by a regular computer. Regular number crunching can't do that. And again, it's that linear way of thinking too. I don't call it linear, but that scientific materialism way of viewing the world, right, won't work for that. You need a way to do these optimization programs and solve them all simultaneously, and that's what a quantum computer can do. So now when you have a quantum computer looking at the demographic of the people and using psychographics and weaponized psychographics at that and delivering memes, it becomes a very, very formidable, not just weapon, but tool, right? Or maybe I should rephrase that: tool, not just a formidable tool or valuable tool, but a formidable weapon if it's in the wrong hands, right? Because it could be used that way. And especially when you're tied into all these other resources that we're all linked into because we're online all the time. And it's
maybe relevant. Google were definitely one of the first customers when the D-Wave came along. And
sure were.
If you're a customer of D-Wave, it's kind of a lifelong deal because you get updated with the latest model, which is entangled with the other models that are out there. Not many of them, but yeah, Google have definitely got one of them at the heart of their AI center, along with their DeepMind.
Right, DeepMind.
Yeah.
And that's where I want to get to the artificial intelligence side of this too, because we were talking about all this, guys. We haven't brought it up to the audience yet. We were talking about it off air. About is people who run through. Okay, let me back up a little bit. There's three things that everybody that experiences Mandela effect seems to experience more than the average population does. One is what's called longitudinal studies, right? Longitudinal studies, where you remember being checked on as a kid, different things at school, going through these programs, right? Special programs, throughout most of your school years, or at least some of them. A higher than normal proportion of people have that experience the effect. I'm going to call it the effect from now on, not the Mandela effect. Just call it the effect. So, and then the other group, the other thing they all have in common, or most have in common more than the average, is that they all feel they had a near-death experience, right? So that's kind of weird, right?
That is kind of weird.
Because that ties into the idea of quantum immortality, or the idea that you shift to parallel dimensions or somewhere else in the universe, the multiverse, when you die, right? So you could actually die in this universe, right? But then be seamlessly in another parallel dimension or somewhere else in the universe, multiverse rather, without you even being aware, or maybe just had a close call, right? But now subtle things are different. That's one of the theories about it. But that multiverse theory is going to tie in at the end of this, because there's a lot that is explained by that. That has nothing to do with actually jumping between realities. It has to do, well, it does, but not the way people think. And then the other thing that people have is this idea that I'm gonna lose my thought train. Sorry, I went off in the quantum realm there.
the three things we had: the longitudinal studies, we had the near-death experiences.
Yeah, synchronicities, because people they not only experience synchronicities more, but they are aware that they experience them more, and they experience them more often. So you could argue that they experience them more often because they experience the effect. They're aware of unusual things happening in their lives, so they just are more attuned to that, right? But it happens a lot more. Like people who experience the effect a lot report synchronicities at just an unreal rate, dozens of times a day in some cases.
It's getting scary some days for me.
Yeah.
Really weird. Really weird. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, I've had it dozens of times in a day sometimes where you'll be writing a word as you're writing, and it'll say it on TV that second after you say it, or write it right in unison with it. I mean, exactly. Or something just totally random. Like I remember one time I was writing an article or a response on Reddit to a post, and I was talking about the Sinbad Genie movie, and I had YouTube playing in the other room, right? And I don't know why, but it ended up on Family Feud for some reason. I think it just went from something totally unrelated to Family Feud. But the volume was high, and I say, and that's when the genie came out of the lamp. And then there's not Richard Dawson's, the other guy, the black host. I can't remember his name at the moment. He's a comedian, but he goes, show me genie in lamp or whatever, right? Exactly, right. I mean, no way. And what are the odds that happened? I never saw that episode of Family Feud before, right? Here it goes right as I hit the keystroke to send when I say that. So those are the kind of things. They're pretty complex things sometimes. They're not just simple things. So how can that happen? And is it really happening because it's you being aware of it more, or is it because you're in tune with something else? And I think the idea of being tuned is a big part of this. Like you're now.
That's where I fall into it. I think once you start to recognize them, you almost start to resonate with something.
Yeah, I think so. Like the idea of being on a different source wave, you're tuned to a different frequency, right? And that ties a little bit into the idea of this holographic universe, and it ties to quantum theory as well a little bit. But the idea is the holographic universe is basically that you get down to the Planck scale, this tiny scale, as small as you can see, that there's something that generates everything that reality projects from. I'm probably butchering that trying to describe it, but and they've never really been able to verify it. They have some articles that kind of suggest that maybe so and maybe not. But the idea that maybe you can hijack that source wave. If you think of two projectors and showing the same movie and they're in unison, right? And then you're wearing a different kind of glasses, 3D glasses. People on one side, I use this analogy, on one side of theater and on the other side of theater. And one projector suddenly has different scenes. Well, to you, you're still seeing the same movie, right? But the other person's seeing something different. And it's because the projector's still in time. It's still showing the same movie, but it's got something different going on. So now two people have something subtly different that they're experiencing, even though they're in the same theater, because of the glasses that they're wearing. It's the way they perceive it.
Yeah, another way you kind of put it that really impacted me and caused me to think, and I liked it, was the search for the God particle. And, you expanded on that. And you said think bigger than particle because, particle and wave, quantum at the same time and everything. And if you think of one of these projectors that Epic was talking about there, think of that as being the pure signal from the creator, the architect, a god, an Anunnaki, whatever you want to believe in, the Wookiee, okay? You've got that true signal, but then you've got this other competing signal now. And it's coming from somewhere artificial. It's somewhere that's been almost would you call it a false signal, an overlay, or just trying to hijack the pure one? How would you explain that, Epic?
Yeah, I think it's a way of hijacking it. It's on the same frequency, like jamming. I'm sure you do. He actually, as you experienced in the military, jamming the signal. So it's hijacking that signal. But it can't hijack it for everybody. Maybe it doesn't want to. It just wants to hijack it for people who it's able to. And that ties into this mimetic engineering and planting that seed and being resonant on that frequency for that to work, right? And so, so in that moment, it's like if you look at it from a strictly religious standpoint instead of a physics standpoint, it's like there's the source wave of God and creation that goes out and propagates all reality and consciousness, and then there's the fake one that we call the devil is using, right? We won't call it the devil in this case, but maybe the devil's an AI, I mean, maybe that's all it ends up being. I
think it might be, dude.
I think so. It's an artificial replication of the true God, right?
Yeah, I think we've got pure intelligence that created this, and anything else competing against that has to be artificial, right?
Sorry, I was muted. So yeah, and when you look at the obsession that some of these people over the years have had with trying to break down the nature of reality, it falls into those two competing disciplines. With the scientific materialists who want to break everything down to an equation and gears, basically, and that's people like Norbert Wiener who invented cybernetics, right? And you want to think of the brain and the mind as a machine that you can program. And then there's the people who have that more philosophical view, and I think when they discovered quantum physics and they really started breaking into it, the people who were really at the cutting edge of it, people like Bohr and Heisenberg, Werner Heisenberg. Heisenberg was reading Plato when he's hiking and stuff, right? And he came up with that idea of how consciousness relates to it. And that passed on to people. It made the atomic bomb possible. And when they started breaking down these things that were just so wild that they couldn't possibly exist, but they somehow do, they had to come up with these place cards to make the equations work, because they don't work the way that regular math does, right? So they used a thing called matrix mathematics, where you take like rows of, let's say, 3 columns of 4, and then you go with 3 columns of 3, but they have to be at a right angle and have to have the same number of columns horizontally as they do vertically. And it builds what's called a matrix, which I found really interesting, not being a mathematician, but it's interesting to build a matrix that way, and it happens to tie to this. But and it predicts this unequal wave. So it's not a harmonic wave anymore. So it's when the wave changes, it's no longer a harmonic wave where it has equal intervals in between, like on an O-scope, right? It's accounting for that Heisenberg uncertainty principle, as he named it. This is all in the 1920s. It's like 1925 to 1927. And
kind of, we can kind of build on this, I think, with something in recent times that I'm sure all listeners to this show will have in their memory. Maybe not. Maybe it's been changed. Boom, boom. But remember the guy at CERN with the big beard? And he had
yes.
He had the Monte Carlo, he had the Bond 1, Mandela 0, something like that. And myself and Anthony Patch, we would go into Monte Carlo mathematics and combinatorial math. I can barely say it, let alone do it. But this ties in exactly with these matrices and things that you're talking about, dude.
Right, because they don't have. It's almost like we think of an algorithm, right? But it's simpler than an algorithm. It's just a piece of the puzzle they don't know. They need to account for the spin, right? They account for the spin because they don't know what the spin is. They don't know where it's going. So they have to try to predict where it's going to go and then see if the prediction is right. So these are the ways to go back and try to reformulate it, right? Like I said, I'm not a mathematician, but I think it's really interesting that this is the way it works. And these terms like, being spun out or the spin of something or, spin doctors or these terms, the way it all kind of ties into consciousness this way, things they're totally dissimilar, just like being entangled, tie in, or get with the program being the same. Why would you say that? Get with the program, right? But it's a meme in our culture. Being spun out or having a spin on something is a meme in our culture. Well, why are they? It's because they're entangled with other concepts, right? It's a way of putting you in that meme, putting you in that intelligentsia, right? And so it's very interesting that works. And the thing with the Bond sign in the Happy video from CERN, it just brings up the subject of CERN rather, and how they're all obsessed with symmetry, right? Everything's about symmetry. And it's because they're looking for the boson, right? And the boson is a particle that has symmetry. They're all even integers. And then there's such a boson, and fermions have uneven integers, right? And they have, half or 2/5 or something like that, or 3/2, weird integers, right? And those particles don't quite match. They're not easy to predict as much. They're there, you find them, sure, right? But it almost, again, you look at this idea of the intervals being like ones and zeros when you're dealing with bosons, right? In a way to predict the way the particles break up, right? But the thing is that when they started doing this work, they put a statue of Shiva up front. That ties back to the idea of, because that's the destroyer, right? Shiva's a destroyer.
And creator.
And Brahma rebuilds, right? Yeah. So what's the significance of that? Well, people say it's the arms, the spokes on the Large Hadron Collider at the LHC, and that's why it's there. I don't buy that, because when they started doing the quantum physics work back in the 20s, that those two camps broke off. The philosophical camp went one direction. They knew the power they had. It's almost like they had this big secret. They both had a big secret. And you had the people that wanted to stay with the kind of Norbert Wiener view. He wasn't there, but that way of just doing things like you program things in reality with the Clockwork Universe kind of way of doing things. And so those people became nuclear physicists that went the philosophical side. They worked on the with Enrico Fermi and did the first cascade. Oh, shucks.
That thought, brother. Hold that thought. Wow. We'll be back on the other side. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. And the only thing that is collapsing today are those waves of what were possibilities, narrowing them down into tighter probabilities, and all coming out at the other end as not the Mandela effect, but something known as mimetic engineering. And that is why some of us are experiencing a very fluid change in reality, things that were once absolutely real, that we lived through, we touched, we tasted, we smelt, we can remember all of those memories, and now they're gone. And other people will tell you that it's absolutely factual, that we're talking mints, and it never ever happened in the first place. Yet both can be true. And both can be wrong as well, because we're in a quantum kind of world, and we've got Epic Journeyman here tonight. I'm going to shut up, because Epic needs to get through this in the final segment. And we got to CERN, somewhere that is very significant in this conversation. It's become infamous because of the particle accelerator, but back in the day, it was working on things like modeling nuclear explosions. And nuclear, it ties into this, as we learned just before the break, thanks to Epic. So I'm going to hand it back to you, dude. We were at Shiva. We were about to hear you trying to pronounce that thing I'm not going to try and pronounce.
Right.
May I first, though, really quickly thank you, brother. This is a lot of work. It's really hard to kind of put this together. I think you've done a brilliant job, not just over the years covering this, but tonight as well. And on behalf of the audience, they can't tell you, but I want to thank you for coming on and laying this out for us, okay?
It's been a pleasure, I tell you. And it's a lot of stuff to try to get out. It could go on for more hours than there are in a day, I guarantee you. But so it's kind of coming down to this one thing, not one thing, but the way they all fit together, the way the puzzle fits together on this. And it does make absolute sense, actually. And the idea is that when they had the Copenhagen interpretation, which is the idea that things exist in a state of reality in an unstable state until they're observed, right? So the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics came about between 1925 and 1927 when Bohr and Heisenberg and all these other guys got together, won the Nobel Prize. Quantum mechanics became the biggest thing there was. This is prior to World War II. And Heisenberg goes and works on, making a nuclear bomb and an atom bomb in Germany, right, basically. And doing, not necessarily making an atom bomb, but working on atomic energy. And everybody's trying to race to get this, they call them stacks, right? Now they call it a core, a reactor, but to get a fission reaction started. Well, it meant more to some people than it does to others, because they felt that the people who believed in the Copenhagen interpretation, that the observer really does collapse reality. And so Einstein and Schrodinger had like a joke between them. We know about Schrodinger's cat, right? The idea that how are you going to prove it, right? And it's the poor cat, having the vial of poison or whatever, it goes off, and as soon as somebody observes it, one time it's alive, one time it's not. Well, it was all kind of really a joke to them because they were more linear, still thinking. They didn't want to believe in spooky action at a distance. The idea that you could actually create reality, because that's what it implies. It implies you can create reality, but not only that, you can keep the randomness that is there, that becomes a manifestation, right? It becomes locked in. Instead of being random and the potential for it to do multiple things, it becomes locked in, right? So now, again, remember, you have linear thinking on one side, the scientific materialist, and then you have the people who are open to this quantum realm, that it's not really just in the microcosm at the tiny Planck scale. Planck was another guy who was there, right, back in the day. That's why it's named that. But it's also able to happen in the macrocosm around us, in the physical world, right? So the people who worked on the Manhattan Project, Robert Oppenheimer believed, right? He believed that if he could achieve this, and it's not quoted many times in this, but he believed in something else. In other words, he believed in that kind of super spectrum hypothesis, if you will, that there's more to life than just what you see in front of you. And by, if you could get the bomb, right, then you actually are opening up a gateway to other worlds, right? So when they went and did the Trinity test and detonated the first nuclear bomb, he's quoted as saying, "I am become death, destroyer of worlds," right? From the Bhagavad Gita, which is a Hindu work, one of a series of books written in the 2nd century BC. And at least that's when it's dated to, the Vedic texts. And so I looked that up, because you hear that all the time. You see him like looking all sullen and, "I am become death." All that stuff, right? And it'll stick in your head. It does to everybody who sees it. And I looked it up. That's not really what it says. What it actually says is something a little bit different. It says, "I am mighty time, the source of destruction that comes forth to annihilate the worlds." This is when Shiva reveals himself as the supreme being, as God, right? Basically, and he's a charioteer riding this guy along to a battle, and along the way reveals who he is, right? And so, if I read the thing properly, it's chapter 11, verse 32. So that means a lot more. "I am mighty time, the source of destruction that comes forth." Well, in the verse right before that, or several verses before that, it's described what he looks like, and he's this many-mouthed, many-faced, many-hands being. Like if you imagine, like I used the analogy before, like Bruce Lee in Enter the Dragon with the mirror room, but it's just like thousands of different mirror images, right? It's like this manifestation of the multiverse, and he says that he is everything at the same time, that he's in everywhere, all at one time, that he is God. And his mouths are fierce, then devouring the enemies and stuff. And it occurred to me that the reason that Oppenheimer said that, and he does describe this later on, was when he saw the radiance of the blast, right? And that was like the arms reaching out of Shiva, not Shiva, but of Krishna, right? In the text. So now you have to wonder now, did he realize, and did other people realize, now that this theoretical physics, which to that point was not provable, until you made the atom bomb, you could not prove that these kind of particles existed and the strong and weak force really could generate that kind of energy, that small amount of matter could cause that huge amount of energy to be released, right? So when they did, that became really significant. Again, you're onto the secret now, this real secret that there's a way to manifest matter, a way to manifest reality, a way to influence people. That also means you can influence consciousness, and the consciousness could be influenced by maybe a particle or a wave. And also that the wave itself, right, the wave that is unstable in all things at once, gets locked in through the observer effect, which is not just a conscious observer, but a device, right? And usually it's referred to as a device. Well, what if that tool can be used and is being used, right, to collapse wave functions, to break things into predictable reality that's controllable? And that gets into the idea of symmetry at CERN,
Yeah,
at the Large Hadron Collider.
Interesting as well. Like you say, when we talk about the observer, it's easy to think of a scientist, somebody physical. Absolutely, measuring device tool. What I find interesting as well, and this is why you find CERN, not CERN, sorry, but the D-Wave, how it's in that big refrigerated system and everything else, and it's all shielded away. And that shielding, it's to protect it from electromagnetic waves of any variety, because even that in itself can be classed as, if you want to call it, an observer, because it's enough to affect that wave particle duality that's going on. And this is why it's quite interesting, because that electromagnetic fields and their ability maybe then to affect this wave that we're talking about ties in absolutely with CERN. Because when you're accelerating particles at close to the speed of light, then they themselves, because they're positively charged, they produce their own electromagnetic field. And when they're colliding, it's not just the protons or the lead, or in some cases, photons of light. Just light. It's not just those two light packets smashing into each other. It's the interaction of electromagnetic fields and what the potential is there, epic, isn't it? Because it's at that level that we can really see where you can have major effects on reality.
That's right. That's right. And people bring up CERN all the time on the subreddit, and to the point that it was banned for a long time. I was banned. I don't bring it up that often, or didn't when I was a user before I was a moderator. I had to make a code word. I called it Voldemort, so I wouldn't get banned every time I tried to bring it up.
Brilliant. I love it, man. This is what I love about humans. We always find ways around things, man.
But it turned out that most people describe CERN and they don't think of the Large Hadron Collider and all the other things associated with, like the Atlas experiment, which we're going to talk about at the end here, which we got to wrap up pretty quick, I guess. But look, we got time though. So it looks like there really is something to this. I mean, all these things we're talking about, why were they really created? So we're talking about collapsing wave particle duality, but we're also talking about making it controllable, right? So if you do that, what better way to do it? You can't blow up a nuclear bomb every day. And what if they were doing above ground nuclear tests to harness some kind of energy to channel something like that or experiment something like that? You never really know. A lot better to have it inside a particle collider where it's under control, right? But the idea that you can break things apart, and the idea that there's entanglement still at play. So when you obliterate a particle, what happens to the other particle it's entangled with somewhere else in the universe, right? I mean, that memory of yours, for example, is entangled with something related to that particle. What happens to that, right? Because now you have the stranded dance partner out there. It's no longer a pair, right? It's something else. And it dawned on me that when the D-Wave came along, and all these things came along because of particle physics. In a way, I mean, the World Wide Web was created specifically to share information. And that's how the HTML protocol was created for CERN. It was created by CERN, right? Yep. And it's D-Wave computers were, no big or small part, created to be able to handle the kind of calculations needed to project those kind of calculations that need to be done to find out what happens with these particle collisions, right? A way to do it faster and maybe predict better. And so all these things kind of tie together, right? But one of the things Geordie Rose said that really hit me was how they are getting more resources than they put out. They come back with more resources from somewhere. Isn't that interesting, right? Because now, what if those resources are those stranded pairs from somewhere, right? Somewhere in some other universe, throughout our universe, there's all these stranded pairs of everything. Every time a particle is obliterated, you could say it's by supernovas and cosmic waves, and sure, that happens all the time. But we're doing it deliberately, right? We're doing it deliberately with, what if there's focused intention behind it? Right? There's focused intention behind it. And it occurred to me that we've been talking about the spread of the universe in such a way, and it being based on consciousness. And there's two things that come into play here. One is that in the physical sense, that the Big Bang is true, and things are going out. They say the expansion of the universe, it creates these pockets in between, these bumps. It's like a straight plane. It becomes flatter the farther out it goes, and it has these bumps in it along the way. And in between, just as a matter of consequence, if the theory holds out, if the Big Bang is true, it by nature creates multiverse. It creates multiple universes because these little pockets, these holes come along the way, right, as it expands. And it really bothered physicists about how could that be? And it's almost like if you think about minds growing, how you go a certain amount of information and project outwards, but maybe there's things missing in between. There's other realities that could exist in there in that same mind. So what if there's a way to implant information there? And what if the actual act of observing and collapsing wave particle duality also eliminates the randomness of nature and evolution? And that can be done by things like the Internet of Things. You know, the fact of being observed by different instruments all the time takes away the ability to, and through EMF basically as well, how that could play a role, because they thought there's very many experiments have been done about how waves affect
Maybe this
observation.
Explains why they want to surround the planet and satellites that are being.
Yes, it does, to lock it in, right?
Yeah, exactly, dude.
So this actually makes a lot of sense, because that quote from Oppenheimer comes into play here. Because now we have something called the bounce back theory. And the bounce back theory tries to account for how you eliminate the unfalsifiability of the expansion of the universe, right? So the flat plane. So the idea is that it goes out and it periodically comes back and snaps back, and then it bounces back out again. And as it comes back together and compresses, all those things that were formerly far apart become closer and closer and closer. And in Terence McKenna's time wave zero hypothesis, which you guys talked about last week.
Talked about this last week.
I know. I've been talking about it for a long time. It's awesome. Like you picked the right clip at the end too, because that's the right one. There's a video that goes with that conference he gave, where he's talking about. It's like a picture of the golden mean, like a shell, like a nautilus shell. How it goes in and it comes into concentric. It's on a spin coming out from the outer reaches to the center. It gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And the idea is that those events have to happen sooner in higher frequency of intervals in between until it finally collapses, right? But also, he said, I don't know about that particular conversation or another one, but he mentioned that as that happens, as things compress, all of time becomes right there, right next to each other, side by side, right? And in that instant, the veil, if you want to call it that, the wall between realities, between universes is smaller. The distance is smaller to go. Everything's compressed, right? And in the bounce back theory, what happens is it comes back into the middle. It loses those bumps, right? Smooths everything back out. Everything is closer together again. And then it expands again. It basically makes another Big Bang or maybe a slower expansion again. Well, that's basically, if you think about it in 3D, instead of that being a nautilus shell, think of it like a sine wave, like a spiral, right? A sine wave is really a spiral seen from the side in 2D, but it's going outwards, emanating wave, right? And this wave comes closer and closer and closer together, and these realities become closer together. Well, in the mind, right? If you can implant something there, right? Then what you can do is maybe, and because we're talking about quantum. Kind of quantum effects here, the idea that you can maybe make a hole in that. So instead of it being predictable and it being Shiva's dance of destruction and destroying the universe and then rebuilding it when Brahma rebuilds it in the Hindu sense, you can make it like instead of just coming with symmetry back together and expanding back out, you can make it like a balloon animal, right? You can make a little expansion off the side of it. You can drain off some of the energy. It's no longer has perfect symmetry, but you keep that compression from destroying the known universe, essentially, right? Well, what if you're kind of doing that, locking reality into place, in a sense, with constant observation, and that's taking away the randomness of nature. It's taking away analog. Before 1998. There's very little digital footprint on the world at all. Everything was, vinyl albums, radio stations, analog TV, or reading a book. There was no digital footprint unless you're working at NASA or a university or something like that. Very little ones and zeros. But now it's almost all ones and zeros, right? Yeah. Isn't that interesting? Because it's predictable. It's predictable, and it's back to that scientific materialism. And it ties to the idea that you can now predictably handle and maybe create reality. Well, that sounds like a big claim, except that inverse of E equals mc squared, of that huge energy of the nuclear explosion, nuclear reaction for that little bit of matter, making that huge amount of energy in a nuclear explosion. They just did the exact same thing reversed the Alice experiment at the Large Hadron Collider. What they did was the Alice portion of it. They used that same kind of high energy with protons and photons. And the protons, oddly like that universe stretching out in the Big Bang and that horizon, these protons pancake as they pass each other. And so they flatten out just like those universes we're talking about flattening out, right? As they pass each other, they make this field, and that field generates new photons as they pass, right? More light that wasn't there. But they also create this particle that has the weak atomic field, literally matter from light. So the inverse of E equals mc squared, using the mc squared part, right, to create the E, right, to create the photons, to create matter. So yeah, that's an amazing development. Just was printed in the 24th.
That's like energy, light to matter, conservation. What do you call it? Conversion.
Yes.
That's like almost a holy grail in science, and like Epic has stated here, this is the latest breaking news out of CERN. And I've always highlighted that CERN is the main game in town, but this article from Symmetry magazine does a good job because it absolutely nails the connection between CERN and other particle accelerators. Because Brookhaven Labs in America, I've mentioned it before, but they were the first one to really hit the 10 tera electron volts, the Strangelet level, ripping the veil, if you want to call it that. But they're also in conjunction. They're connected to the Atlas and the Alice. So these things all work in tandem, Epic. And this is big news, really big news, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it ties into an old classic movie that I think just is wonderfully ties this all together in a way, about how there's a movie called Forbidden Planet with Leslie Nielsen from the Naked Gun fame, right? People remember Leslie Nielsen.
Yeah,
it's a great movie, and it's got Robbie the Robot in it. One of the first times the robot was a star of a movie. But what happened, the premise of that movie was that everything in that world, when they landed in that world, was created by the scientist who was inhabiting that world. He had found this old civilization called the Krell. And there was this huge underground facility that had just miles and miles of like reactors creating energy, right? And he put this headset on, and anything he thought about, he could make material. So he created, won't spoil the whole movie because should know about it by now, but he created all these things to make his life more comfortable, including company, right? And animals, all kinds of things, just from the power of his own mind. But along the way, this monster from the id, this is the nightmare creatures of his own subconscious manifested, and it was in the world. And he had to make this these kind of bunker to live in, and with big shutters and stuff. He had to lock down when the people came. Try to get them all to go away, but they wouldn't go. These people coming from Earth. So the premise is, though, that idea to manifest reality through this huge amount of power, it required this enormous amount of power. And this movie's from like 1958, I want to say. So to think that they had that down and knew about that then means that they planned on doing something like that all along, right? The fact that they were talking about it at university level, that you had people at going to these Macy's meetings doing the cybernetic stuff, the work of Norbert Wiener to program the mind, right? Like a machine. But at the same time, you have these people with the more philosophical side trying to exploit the quantum world, knowing that they can affect matter, right? But what better way to affect matter than to affect the mind? And if you have a constant observer, then this explains why the lessening of effects we experience right now. As more and more the world becomes constantly observed, as more of the world becomes subject to surveillance, essentially, as well, the more it becomes saturated in EMF, the less the possibility for something to randomly occur will happen.
The more predictable reality becomes.
And it becomes the boson, right? We're talking about the boson being equal integers in ones and zeros, essentially, right? Not that they don't have both particles, they're both parts of it make up a neutron, right? But the fact that that's what's being exploited is pretty powerful in a way, because it does mean they know exactly what they were doing, or knew exactly what they're doing when they put that statue of Shiva up front, because that's exactly the parallel, right? That's what they're doing. And I'm not blaming it all on CERN. Don't get me wrong. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that the fact that there's been two separate groups of people working all along with this knowledge in a community and not sharing it with us, right? And the fact that these people in these longitudinal studies ended up being people who most of them went to Stanford, ironically. And these are people like Sergey Brin, and Larry Page, who started Google, Thiel, who started Palantir and PayPal, Elon Musk. Elon Musk is a trippy dude in his own right. We all love the guy. I like him, but he was raised in South Africa, but his parents were famous advocates of technocracy, right? And he ended up going there.
Not the head of the technocratic party in Canada.
In Canada, yes, he was. Yeah. And the fact that he ended up going to space camp, literal space camp here in America.
Make it up. I know you could not make this stuff up.
No, right. But he was offered, these people were PhD candidates at Stanford. In the course of researching this, I went back and found all these people. And it turned out that Lewis and Frederick Terman, started by Lewis Terman, they had this thing called Genetic Studies at Genius, and they followed people through their entire lifetimes. And it's because of this parallel I found with people being experiencing this, having longitudinal studies being a common thing that people who experience the effect highly shared in common, right? And so sure enough, you find these people, and there's other people over there too that go through Stanford, that go to this not necessarily go through the whole program, but they're offered this PhD candidacy. In the case of Musk, he went there and quit the next day. But there's something else that went on there that's very important, and it's the Parapsychology Research Center, right? And that's very significant because we don't have time to get into that today, but that's very significant. And then the fact that they also had people like Ingo Swann and these social engineering experiments, remote viewing, all these things kind of in a sense that and Aquino's mom, Michael Aquino's mom, was there when she was 14 and part of the program. The fact that all these people came, she stayed, and went through there. It just seems interesting that in the context of everything else, you find that they built the world's first artificial intelligence there. The artificial intelligence lab was built at Stanford University in 1962. They started using first kids with autism, and even Coco the signing gorilla were used to stretch the information being entered into this AI. And so here people think of artificial intelligence being this relatively new thing, but it started at Stanford University, and all these people who came in and some left and some went to better and bigger things without graduating, it makes you wonder if they saw that artificial intelligence first and what they know about it. I mean, you can see it's an SRI lab now, maybe it's not that big a deal. But
it was me as well when I found out that even Alan Turing, he had written about the machines, is it the machine with a mind or machine minds, or I can't remember what the article was.
I can't remember the name of the title, yeah.
Yeah, but it was basically the premise was artificial intelligence, machines that can think.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what it was called, I think. When I last looked, maybe it's changed now, Epic.
But it all ties us back to a neat bow in a way, because we're talking about before you had D-Waves, they were able to try to predict these quantum scale things and make it work better and have more control. You needed something that could actually take all this data and process it. What better thing than artificial intelligence, right? And to build it from that early on, from 1962 onward, and to have all these people who ended up leading the field in artificial intelligence. All those people are involved in artificial intelligence. So very, very interesting in that they were tied up in that program.
Oh, brilliant, brother. Brilliant. And, you think of that D-Wave, the AI, it basically demanded something like the D-Wave that could come along, take all of that information, optimize it, and pick out the kind of patterns. And, dude, we need to do this again. Hopefully sometime really soon, because
kind of rushed at the end there.
Yeah, but listen, man, you know me, I've got shows all the time, and I'm blown away. I really am blown away. This is a show I'm going to listen to again. I know all of you will want to listen to again. It's one of the rare shows that I'll be putting up onto YouTube, I think, folks. People need to see this. People need to hear this. Tell everyone, and I'll get Epic back next month. So until next time, wherever you are, make it TFR. Stay tuned. More live radio coming at you right after these short messages. Oh, man. Now, Epic, if there's anything you want to add in, now would be the time, brother, because I'm still recording right now on the video end. So if there's anything else you think you might have missed out or what you want people to look at, and with your permission,
I felt the pressure of the clock at the end. Yeah.
So, with your permission as well. If you want me to put it onto YouTube, I'll do that. And if I may, I'll take the list of links that you gave me
Oh, please. Yeah,
and
because
I'll put
that
them,
really gives context. Yeah.
exactly, and I'll put them all into one article. I'll write just a little blurb as an introduction. I think the show speaks for itself. Your research along with it, people can follow along. I really think you're onto something here.
Well, I'd like to describe if I had a more prepared, I guess, with a way to kind of break it down point by point. But it's hard to do because you don't know where you're going to go when you start, right? Because there's so many aspects of it, but they do all tie together. They all completely tie together, and it makes perfect sense, actually, in my mind.
For people out there, people that are totally unaffected, how would you explain that to them?
The people who aren't affected at all? Yeah. Well, the thing is, like you are not those things that we talk about, the smell of a rose, for example, making you think of that car or something. You're not entangled with that thing, so you're not part of it. You didn't see Bigfoot, right? You saw the standing bear, or you saw that's what it is, right? It's a different way, and you're on a different wavelength. You're just on a different wavelength. Not saying you used the God devil analogy earlier. Not saying you're on the wrong side of it. Nothing like that.
No, they're just looking for you weren't affected. Kind of social or some kind of marker that you've left.
Right, because they planted these memes in people. They did. They planted these memes in people, and so what I don't know and what hasn't been verified yet, and this is another show we can get into because I think this is an important aspect, is what does it mean? Does it mean if you have this particular marker that you are less susceptible, or does it mean you're more susceptible? Right? Like, what is it? Are they trying to program? They're trying to get more people that are susceptible, or are they trying to find the people that they reach the most that aren't affected?
Or is it just that they know that they can target that particular? Yeah, it's hard to figure out. I mean, does that mean that your mind's made up a specific way where they've got a back door in, or they already know what kind of stimulus to put on the screen in front of you? And bear in mind, folks, we're now living at a time where you've got like eye tracking software, and we might not realize it, but our mobile phones, the minute we look at one image, even a headline, it knows exactly what reaction we have to that, like where we even look, where our eyes go. And it's that's how creepy it is, Epic. The psychology behind this. That they know more about us than we know ourselves because we don't even notice we're doing things like this.
They say in the 90th percentile that they can predict what we're going to do within like an hour and a half. I'll dig up that article for you. I know I read that just not too long ago, and that's frightening as all heck. Just from the basic stuff they get all and garner off of smart behaviors everywhere else, to think that they have that kind of ability, or somebody does, is just an amazing thing. And with the mind reading technology, literal mind reading, that's really coming out. That's really going to happen, right? It is happening. You can see images and hear sounds. It's going to get better and better. That's the thing. It's not going to get worse, right? It's going to get better. And we're not that far away from a world where you are going to walk instead of through an airport scanner, for the body scanning, and read your thoughts as you walk in.
And that thoughts, those memories, you can never forget that when Eric Ladosinski was studying and getting ready to try and formulate how to put together a quantum computer, he was obsessed with the work of Stuart Hameroff and quantum biology and the quantum effects in the brain. And I always describe it as like a warm and wet kind of quantum computer. It's what they would love to do. They would love to have something like that as opposed to a big fridge with a D-Wave. But, memories, what are they? And if there's these quantum effects in there, we could literally be talking about the particle, the memory being stored in a particular position of spin. Now, if you can come along and you can influence just the slightest nudge, you change just Planck scale of that spin. It's you
cascade of other things. Yeah,
it will absolutely cause an effect. It's going to manifest as what it wasn't before. It's been changed. Its state has literally then changed.
Explains mood swings a bit, huh?
Yeah, you could do that with electromagnetic fields, but you mentioned in one of your articles optogenetics.
Yes. I wish we got into that more. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because that could, I think that could be literally like a kind of, how would I put it? Almost like
a delivery system?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, deliver it straight in and whatever it needs to be. Because I dare say our brain, it produces different different
electrochemical responses and
yeah,
things. Is that the one?
And everything, and that voltage, those different differentials, that could be enough to change the state of a spin, you know?
I think in the comment section of that one, I mentioned, I don't know if it was in the article, but in the comment section, I'd mentioned somebody was going off about how, no, that's just, it has to be a gene made, to be in your brain, to be influenced by the light directly and all that stuff. I'm like, no, man, it needs to be in your frontal lobe, by your optic nerve, right? And that there are delivery systems. They're called GMOs. You can put that gene into your system. So it could very well be that something you ingest, right, is popular in the culture you're in, that you're definitely, feeding on, builds up over a span of time, and it is more influenceable by easily readily influenced.
It does make you wonder, I don't know if you've heard any of the shows I've done with Kevin McCairn, but he talks about a totally different aspect of the Andromeda that's going on. He talks about, and it's important to kind of put this into context. He studied neuroscience in Edinburgh Uni. He then went on to be one of the leading kind of experts and published as well on the work on Tourette's. And some people don't like him because when he was doing science, he was using the primates and stuff like that. But listen, science, if you were to learn how we discovered everything, it's not pretty, folks.
Yeah, you don't want to be Dr. Delgado.
Yeah, the point being, when he looks at some of the crazier videos out there, people spitting on things and people's reactions, what first alerted him that there might be something different going on was he was watching some of the same things playing out in real life that he had seen the monkeys doing when they had been stimulating parts of the brain. And over time, over the course of the Andromeda being out there, more and more studies coming forward with the neurological type aspect to this. And what I've come to learn from working with him is they used to use viruses to deliver things into the monkeys' brains. Rabies was a good vector, but it would only last for they call it third generation.
Don't they call those like those little packets? Are they called chads? Something like that. Yeah, the virus is the carrier for whatever you put inside it, right?
Because it's got a way of networking in through the blood-brain barrier, and it turns out that SARS, the actual original SARS from the early 2000s, I didn't know this. I thought it was just obviously respiratory system, but they found that it had a way into the brain, and it was better than rabies for scientific research because it would have a longer lasting effect. And whatever they were trying to do, it would have more time to take hold. And his theory, his hypothesis is that there's, obviously there's something going on with people's lungs and things. But the way people are acting, the batshit craziness of people, it could tie in with what we're talking about here.
It definitely can. It definitely can.
Yeah, it could.
And I thought about this too, that it's very, very strange that the people who are having the worst problem with COVID-19 specifically, without being too conspiratorial about that, are the nations that ingest the most GMO corn. It's a fact.
That's interesting.
It's just a weird thing.
Yeah, that's very
it's
interesting,
true.
man.
It's U.S., Mexico, Brazil, and China. That's them, right? And that's a weird thing, Now Russia's up there too, and they don't have GMO corn that I know of. So that's one thing that goes in the face. But of the top five, they all do. And so, but I thought about that too. That the way that why are they pushing? This is the conspiracy side of me. Why are they pushing hydroxychloroquine? Right? Why are they pushing that? What possible reason is there to do that? Well, I was reading about the side effects, and it tied into the Mandela effect a little bit, because one of the other effects that people report, I left out, but it's pretty common, but not as common as the other ones, is ringing in the ears, right? And one of the side effects of hydroxychloroquine is ringing in the ears. So I started wondering out loud to myself, not that out loud, I don't talk to myself that often, but but in thought, right? Is it not possible that there's something that ties those two together, those two things, being susceptible, experiencing an effect, that ringing in the ears, it also ties into something with this neurological pathway that lets that happen. It's not tinnitus, right?
And how could you test a global population on how well it's working? You could give them a whole list of crazy things to do and see how many people jump through the hoops.
Yeah.
I'm saying.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, we didn't get to the technological explanation, like those how those flip-flops could have been caused by something like Myriad, the digital overlay targeting IPs. I kind of implied it, but it'd be good to get that in sometime if we go back and address this, because there are some things that have explanations.
Yeah, even if you touch on that just now, we can certainly come back and do another show on it. But just a brief, even a minute or so on what you're talking about there, just to add it on to the end of this video. And we're definitely, if I can steal you away for another day next month, I'd love to come back and revisit this, man.
So in the process of looking over these two specific flip-flops that we experienced, these were events we experienced, dozens, if not hundreds of people experienced, right? Well, dozens in each group that I was involved with, and hundreds beyond that, not even tied to this subreddit. So specifically, Apollo 13 and the van from Back to the Future. Well, the thing is, there's a company called Myriad that does digital imaging that goes back to old movies and old TV shows and puts in mostly advertising, but it also puts in like things in the background, changes the car. Sometimes the cars for advertising, they'll put a Saab in there instead of the Lincoln the guy was, not maybe not Lincoln, something maybe similar size, but what they're driving, because they're advertising for that car, right? They'll put beer bottles in for Corona or whatever, right? And they've been doing it since 2009. Interesting, it's that date again, right? And the fact that they're able to do that and not be detected by people, like one of the popular things they do is put new ads on TVs in the background on old TV shows. So they're sitting at the bar and they're talking not necessarily at Cheers, but something like that. Let's say we're in a bar environment and the commercial is playing on the TV in the background is a commercial they put there. Or they go back and put new ads on your DirecTV old DVR recordings, things like that. So the fact that they're able to do that and without you even knowing about it and undetected is an amazing thing that it shows. If you could target an IP address, you're watching that clip. Not saying it's Myriad the company, but somebody has that same kind of technology, because you can also use a thing called face-to-face, which does it's analog though, but it's lifetime editing of facial features and things like that. While it's actually live, like you're watching a YouTube video, you could actually change, with Putin or Trump or whatever he's saying. That's a Stanford product actually. And again, but what's interesting is the fact you can do it.
Would you kind of like compare that to kind of like real-time deep faking for
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But better, because you're not necessarily you're animating the face of the person that's that real face. You're not changing his face. You're just making it's a puppet now basically that they have tied up on the face-to-face one. It's doing all these funny expressions and stuff. You can see some videos about that on YouTube. It's called Face-to-Face.
Really good videos of that on YouTube.
Yeah, it's amazing. And then the other things with that, it totally ties in directly to that Back to the Future van. And I can say that having chronicalized or maybe not chronicalized, doing a chronology of that, there was a post before we watched that implied that it had been changed, that hadn't been watched yet. People hadn't got together and started really investigating it yet. So you could almost make a case that the seed was planted for us to go look at that ahead of time, right? And if you're targeting a specific community,
perhaps if without that post, nobody might have picked up on that. But you throw that out there, you throw that idea out there, and it makes people go and look at something, right? Obviously, you go and look, you rush, you think, oh, I know how that is. That can't have changed.
Right, and it's already been changed. Yeah, and your IP, your specific IPs, because Reddit has that information, right? And they have OpenAI on there too, watching your every conversation, because it's trying to learn your conversation style to be better at chatting, right? Then there's resources already there in play that can certainly do that.
It's not hard for them to figure out who's easily susceptible to Mandela's, especially after everyone starts talking about them.
Right.
They then know that must give them a rough demographic, a rough target audience to play with. Would you agree?
Oh, definitely. And at the time, there was only around 20,000 people, and it started spiking in 2016 that were members. I think I joined, it was 19,000 something, somewhere in there. Way more than that now, 10 times that literally now. But that would also explain why there's fewer of them as well, because there's an ethical quandary there. If you're affecting 200,000 people instead of 20,000, that's more than just being a sample group. Yeah. That's a mass population, right? So there's a lot to this.
Yeah, there's a lot to it, because you can almost you could spend time giving. Oh, it's weird, dude, because you could take this all angles. You could see how many people it takes for something to turn into a more significant almost taking on a consciousness of its own, you know, like it said, jumping from mind to mind.
Yeah, that's the memetics of it. Yeah.
Yeah, like the hundredth Mandela, you know.
That's exactly what it is. Like I was thinking about whether we should bring that up in the context of our conversation, because it is the 100th monkey, right? Because you instill those memes, and then at a certain point they stop needing to be seen anymore. It's just like the selfish gene from Dawkins. It's just it's passed on, but subconsciously they're doing it without seeing the same meme you did. It's just part of the collective.